My name is Bryce. I'm one of the pastors here on staff, and I'm also the son to the greatest father ever in the world, Pastor Ed Ivie, our lead pastor here, and we're blessed to have such a great lead pastor here with us. He's actually gone. Him and my mom are in Fort Worth, Texas this weekend, and they're doing a prophetic presbytery there. If you've been to our prophetic presbyteries before, it's something similar. They're with Tom Lane, Wayne Drain, some of those guys. So if you're thinking about him today, would you just be praying for him? I know that God wants to lead him, direct him, use him, speak through him in a powerful way. And so would you just be praying for him, lifting my parents up? That would be awesome. But for now, today, y'all are stuck with me, which is really good for me, and hopefully it's good for you too. But we're going to be wrapping up our series today. But before we get into that, I want to share two things with you really quick. The first was, how many of you guys have made it out to one of our open houses? The open houses, man, that's a great turnout. We had an awesome time at our Imagine open houses. We got to look at floor plans, designs, concepts. We got to walk around our future home, and we really had a blast. So thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it. And if you didn't get a chance to make it out to one of them, that's okay. Hang in there. There's going to be more in the future as we kind of continue in our process and our build out. And then the second thing is this. You saw in our video announcements, Reach. Easter at Living Waters, it's going to be crazy. And as a matter of fact, you also got 2 invite touch cards in your bulletin. Can you just take those out really quick and put them in the air for me? Just really quick. Can I just see them really quick? All right. Listen carefully. These are not for you. These ain't for your kids, for you to put your old gum on to fall under your seat. These are for your friends, your family members, your neighbors who don't know Jesus, who've never been to church, who've never been to Living Waters. Those touch cards are for them. Don't keep them to yourself. Give them out. Invite people to church for Easter. The statistics are crazy high. I can't remember the exact number, but the majority of people, when asked to go to church, they'll agree and they'll say yes. And especially for Easter. Easter's going to be nuts. It's Reach, Easter at Living Waters. I sit on the creative team that kind of plans our services sometimes, and we're planning and cooking up some crazy stuff. So it's going to be really cool. It's going to be an illustrated, interactive, creative type message, and I think that you're really going to enjoy it. We're also adding a Saturday at 4 p.m. service because we pack the place out at Easter. So you got to make sure you get here. There's an overflow service that Saturday at 4 p.m. because parking's crazy, the lobby's crazy, this place is packed, and it's a bunch of fun. So invite your friends and family members. Reach Easter at Living Waters. It's going to be a blast. Today, we're going to be wrapping up our series on Leprous, Lessons from the Lepers. And we're going to be looking at a story today of a man who kind of encountered and had this exchange or really spent some time with Jesus. And I want to preface, he did not have physical leprosy. He had what I'd like to call more of a spiritual condition of leprosy. And if you've been in this series with us this month, you would have heard my dad kind of teaching on what leprosy meant. It was surely a physical disease that people had, but at the time, the culture, even the religion, they believed that you got leprosy because of something that you did wrong in your life. So if there was sin in your life, if you had committed sin, people believed that because of that sin, you received leprosy. And as a result, you were banished and kicked out of the community. You were considered a reject, no longer accepted, no longer able to do or behave like other people behaved, and you were forced to live on the outskirts of town with other lepers in a leper colony. Total rejects. And so today we're going to look at a bit of a rejected man. And that's why I say that he had more of a spiritual case of leprosy. Because the reality is, when we were all born into this world, we all had a spiritual case of leprosy. We were all born into this life with sin. And the great news is that Jesus comes to us, comes to heal, to clean away our leprosy or our disease of sin. And he comes to make us whole and give us a new life. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Would you open your Bible with me to Luke chapter 19? Luke chapter 19 is the story that we're going to focus on in the teaching today. It's going to be in the screens behind me, but let's read this together. Luke chapter 19, starting in verse 1, says this. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. Everybody say Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus. Good old Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a good look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. Poor Zacchaeus. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. He said, "Zacchaeus, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today." Look what happens. Zacchaeus quickly comes down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. I'd be pretty excited too. But the people around, they were displeased. "He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner," they grumbled. And meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, "I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord. And if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much." And Jesus looked at him and responded, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost." Isn't that a good word? Man, what a powerful word that we get to look at today. Would you just turn to your neighbor? Actually, before I do that, the topic or the message title today is "Jesus is your friend." And it's really a basic kind of phrase, a simple thing to say, but it has a lot of deep theological truth to it. Jesus is your friend. Now, would you turn to the person next to you and just tell them, "Jesus is your friend"? Jesus. Oh, that's good. Would you turn to the other person next to you, your second choice, and would you just tell them, "You too"? Jesus is your friend too. Yeah, we don't want to leave that second choice out. That would be sad. When I was a freshman and sophomore in high school, we lived in North Carolina at the time. I'm sure you've heard my dad, if you've been around Living Waters for a little bit, he's shared some stories of our time in North Carolina. But I spent my freshman and sophomore years in high school in North Carolina. And I don't know if you're familiar with the culture there, that southern North Carolina culture, or what goes on, especially as you're a high school student. But at the high school I went to at the time, there were if you were involved in the music scene, or really the types of music you listen to, there were only 3 types of music that were really popular. And as kids, you only listened to one of them. And that kind of defined the clique or the group that you were in. And so the 3 types of music were country music, where, you'd crank it up, get in your 4-wheeler and go mudding. And some Florida people know about that. And you've got your rap music for your clubs and your parties and things like that. And then you've got your heavy metal. Now, in North Carolina, heavy metal is big. It's a big deal. And as a high school student at 15 years old, maybe some of you know me, but I was surely not about to listen to country or rap music. So I gravitated towards heavy metal. I loved me some heavy metal. Now, my parents didn't love that I loved heavy metal. But I loved heavy metal, and I still do a little bit today. Is that okay? Like, one of your pastors likes heavy metal. It's not a sin, so it's okay. I love heavy metal, and so I gravitated towards that. And you know how it goes. Based on the kind of music you listen to as a teenager, it shapes who you are a little bit. It shapes your behaviors, your interests, who you hang out with, what kind of activities you do. And so at school, I gravitated, and I wanted to have metalhead friends. The tough guys. I wanted to be a tough guy. I wanted to be a metalhead because I loved heavy metal music. And so, we would get around with our friends and we'd have fun and things like that. And we'd try to be tough, try to sneak into like heavy metal concerts, but we were too young and we were like, "Oh, that's okay. We'll like rock out heavy metal music anyways." And then we'd like sneak out to my like backyard of my parents like before like they got home, and we would like secretly smoke cigarettes, and we thought we were like super cool. We were like, "Oh, we're smoking cigarettes, we're so heavy metal," and "Oh shoot, they're coming home, quick, hide." Like we'd be like going crazy and things like that. And I think that works like all fine and good if you're really a tough guy. If you're really into heavy metal and you're really a tough guy. The problem is that, I don't know if y'all know me, but I am not such a tough guy. I would definitely classify myself as a lover and not a fighter. And so I'd put on this persona and kind of behave a certain way at school so that people would accept me as a metalhead and a tough guy. But the reality was I was kind of a little bit of a phony. And let me give you a specific example of this. I wouldn't say that I was afraid of the dark. I just preferred the light. And I know there are many of you in this room today that prefer the light. It doesn't matter how old you are. Deep down, some of y'all are like, I'll take daytime over nighttime any day. And so I was afraid of the dark. Let's just get real. I was afraid. 15 years old, I was afraid of the dark. And so I would be in my bed at night, 2 a.m., and I'd be thinking to myself, I was terrified. And I was thinking like Freddy Krueger or like that guy from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's in my closet, and he's going to jump out and scream and like saw my body in half. Like, this is graphic, I'm sorry, but this is what was running through my mind. And I was thinking, probably on account of all of the horrible horror movies I watch with my tough guy friends. And so I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? Like, I could be dead any minute. So I did what any logical 15-year-old would do. I stood up. I gathered my belongings, that being my blanket and my pillow, and I snuck into my parents' room. Don't judge me. Y'all have all been there at one point or another. At some point, and if you haven't, you've at least considered it. You're like, maybe I need to sneak into my parents' room because I can't sleep. And so I'd go in all like stealth-like. You got to be like super quiet because you don't want your parents to wake up. You know, I didn't want my dad waking up knowing that like his 15-year-old son had to still come in and sleep on his floor at night. Sometimes it didn't always work out though, so like I'd go in and I'd sneak in. He'd wake up. Bryce, is that you? Yeah. You sleeping in here again? Yeah. Unfortunately, that happened until I got married. No, I'm kidding. Seriously, though, seriously. I would go and I'd sneak in, and by the time I got down on the floor and I'd lay down, sometimes I would think to myself, if my metalhead friends knew that I was sleeping on my parents' floor right now, they would ridicule me. They would never accept me for who I am. They would never, ever accept the real me. If they knew, they would reject me. This is bad news. Wake up and go to school and some kid be talking about how he's afraid of the dark. Be like, what an idiot, afraid of the dark. In my head, I'm like, oh, snap. Like if they ever knew I was afraid of the dark, they would never, ever accept me for who I really am. And it's funny, and I know I've kind of gotten a little vulnerable and opened up to you here, but the reality is every single person in this room is afraid of being rejected. We have the innate desire inside of us to be accepted. We like to feel accepted. I don't think there's any person in this room that would raise their hand and say, oh, no, I mean, I really love feeling rejected. That feels really nice. It doesn't happen. We want to be accepted. And most of the time, we'll do whatever it takes to feel accepted. We'll put on whatever persona, we'll put on whatever kind of facade or mask that we need to do so that our friends will like us and accept us, our coworkers will accept us, perhaps your kids or your spouse will accept you. But there's always that check in your spirit, and you're thinking to yourself, if people knew who I really was, would they accept me? And this is exactly where Zacchaeus is in this story. And it really doesn't jump out on the page until you examine the context a little bit. Zacchaeus was a reject. In his community, in his region, he was a reject. Let me show you here in verse 2. It kind of describes a little bit who Zacchaeus was. Verse 2 says, there was a man there in the region named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. We don't really always grasp the full appreciation of what that means in our modern culture today. But tax collectors were not liked people. Tax collectors, let me break it down. In the Roman Empire, you had the emperor, and he would charge a certain tax, much like our taxes kind of work today. Let's say for the purposes of this example, it was a 10% tax that the emperor demanded every single person pay on goods or entering the city or whatever that is, living taxes. A tax collector went out and collected taxes. But they made their money, they made their income or their way of living, they made money by putting a surplus percentage or adding an additional charge on top of that 10%. Let's say they bumped it to 20%. And Roman centurion guards enforced this law so that people had to pay 20% taxes to a tax collector, knowing that the emperor only charged 10 and knowing that the tax collector was pocketing the other 10%. Essentially, a tax collector stole money from people. This is how they made a living. And so Zacchaeus here isn't just a tax collector, he's a chief tax collector in the region. That means he's good at what he's been doing, and he's been doing it for a really long time. He's probably got 100, maybe at least 100 people, tax collectors under him, charging the same kind of percentages, and he's taking a cut from everybody. People did not like tax collectors. Bad news, breaking it on down, Zacchaeus was a bad guy. He was a bad dude. He was a criminal. He was a crook. He stole money from poor people. Zacchaeus was not loved or liked by many. He was a reject. He was extremely rich, extremely wealthy, but ultimately he was totally rejected by the people around him. They called him a notorious sinner. That's actually a derogatory term in this context. And so we look here, and I wonder if there were times when Zacchaeus was thinking to himself, I wish people could just see past all that I do. I wish people could see past my profession, how I make my money, and I wish they could see me for who I really am. I wish they could see the real me. And if they saw the real me, maybe they wouldn't reject me. It's in this context, in this framework, that Jesus does two things in Zacchaeus' life. Two things that radically transform his life forever. And I believe that they apply to us today. If we can grasp these two principles, these two concepts, I believe it'll change your life and my life forever. It'll change the way we think, the way we act, the way we behave, all of it. If we can grasp the same two things that Zacchaeus grasped in this story. The first thing is this: Jesus accepted Zacchaeus for who he was. And I'm here to tell you today, Jesus accepts you for who you are. He accepts you for who you are. Look at this. Jesus is coming through the town, and he's walking, and Zacchaeus climbs up this tree. In verse 5, it says, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy, but the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. So Jesus walks up to this tree. Zacchaeus is thinking to himself, I'm a pretty high-profile guy. Jesus is a pretty high-profile guy. And we're pretty sure that Zacchaeus was a Jewish man, so he would have known that the Messiah, stories of the Messiah coming. He would have known that Jesus was calling himself the Messiah and the Savior. He climbs up a tree to see what's going on. And what happens? Jesus walks up to that very tree, never had an interaction with him before, never had a conversation, never met the guy before. Looks up at him and says, Zacchaeus, why don't you come on down from that tree? We need a place to crash tonight. Your spot looks pretty good. Let's get together. Let's have some dinner. Let's talk. I want to be your friend. And as Zacchaeus is blown away, he's thinking to himself, does this Jesus guy know what I do for a living? Does he know how I make money? Does he know my reputation? Does this Jesus guy know who I really am? Jesus knew. He calls him by name. Zacchaeus, why don't you come on down? Man, he's exploding with excitement and joy. Why? Jesus accepts me. He accepts me for who I really am. You mean I don't have to behave a certain way? Jesus accepts me, a chief tax collector. Jesus says, let's have a good time. Let's go to your place and let's party. The people around, they're pretty upset. What's going on? I mean, wouldn't you be too? Thinking to myself, I'm a good person. I do good things. I give to the poor. I give to charity. I go to church often. I read my Bible. I pray a lot. Jesus is coming to town. If anybody deserves to hang out with Jesus, it should be me. What's this guy doing? What's this reject doing hanging out with Jesus? I mean, I think you'd be pretty mad. I know I would be pretty mad. Jesus comes to town and he doesn't even like wave at me. What's going on? See, so often in our culture and our mindset, we think just like the people around Jesus and Zacchaeus thought. We think that in order to belong, in order to be accepted, we must behave a certain way. First you behave, and then you belong. That's what our culture teaches us. That's what religion teaches us. My goodness, that's what so many churches, even in our area, teach us. Hey, you want to come to church? First you got to clean up. First you got to do A, B, and C. Then you belong. I mean, that's even where we live in Southwest Florida with the amount of gated communities and private clubs and golf courses, this is what we believe. In order to belong, you must first behave. Jesus flips that all around. He turns the whole system upside down. He says, no. You belong, and then you behave. You belong. You are accepted, Zacchaeus. I know who you are. I know you by name. I know your profession. I know what you do for a living. I know the mistakes you made. I know the sin in your life. I know the kind of people you hang out with, and I accept you for who you are. No strings attached. This is great news for us today. You don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be perfect. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life. It doesn't matter the kind of sin that you've experienced, the kind of sin that you've committed, the struggles in your life, the mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter if you're in here today and you're struggling with a drug addiction or alcoholism or sexual immorality or greed or anger or pride. It doesn't matter. Jesus accepts you for who you are. He knows you by name. You don't have to clean up. You don't have to behave a certain way. You don't have to do A, B, and C and get your ducks all in a row. No, Jesus accepts you for who you are. Man, what good. It's incredible news. The best illustration or the example that I could think of, thinking back in a moment where I just truly felt accepted was a time that I was in 8th grade, and my first girlfriend had broken up with me. I can't really even call her a girlfriend because I was only allowed to see her at church, and I don't know what kind of girlfriend you can have at 13 and 14 years old. And looking back now, I can see how, stupid I was, that I was just so devastated. But at 14 years old, this was the biggest thing on my radar. My girlfriend broke up with me. My world is shattered, just totally shattered. I mean, I'm just hysterical. I'm bawling. And now I look back, like I said, and I'm like, Bryce, what were you doing? Like, now married to the most beautiful woman ever in the world. I'm like, I shouldn't have cared. But at that time, this was a big deal for me. And I remember my dad that night. I remember it so clearly. I was so heartbroken. And I remember my dad just holding me. He's just got his big arms and he's hugging on me, and I'm just bawling. And I just remember his words. He was saying things like, "I love you. I accept you. It's not you. There's nothing wrong with you. I love you." And there was a sensation I felt in that moment that I'll never forget. And I just felt loved and accepted. And I'm just wondering if perhaps Zacchaeus felt a similar way when he came down from that tree with just this great excitement and joy. And maybe Jesus put his arm around Zacchaeus' shoulder, and they're kind of walking up to his giant mansion. And I wonder if Zacchaeus is just exploding with joy and excitement because for the first time in his life, somebody accepts him for who he is. He doesn't have to clean up. He doesn't have to do anything about it. Man, something's going on in Zacchaeus' life. For the first time, somebody accepted him for who he really was. That's the first thing, is that God, Jesus, he accepts you for who you are, but he doesn't leave you where you are. See, Jesus accepted Zacchaeus for the person that he was, but he didn't leave him in that spot. He didn't leave him where he was. I'll prove it to you. Look here, verse 8. We'll pick it back up. It says, "Meanwhile, they're back at Zacchaeus' house. Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, 'I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much.' Jesus responded, 'Salvation has come to this home today. For this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost.'" We aren't told how long Jesus and Zacchaeus spent together that day. If they had a meal, it was probably at least a half-day endeavor. I mean, cooking food and hanging out during that time, it took a long time. And so what you got here is Jesus spending a lot of time with really, really, really bad people, befriending and becoming friends with some really bad people, criminals, crooks, drug dealers, you name it, in the area. And while all of this is going on in Zacchaeus' house, maybe they're laughing and they're eating and drinking and telling stories, something begins to happen in Zacchaeus' life. Something begins to change, stir up. So much so that he stands up and he's like, guys, I got an announcement to make. I got a bit of a confession to make. I'm out. I'm changing everything. I'm done. I quit my job. As a matter of fact, if I'm giving everything that I own, I'm giving half of it to the poor. And if I've ever cheated somebody on their taxes, catch this, I'm going to repay them 4 times as much. Zacchaeus just went financially bankrupt. What happened? What kind of power could transform a man like Zacchaeus? Jesus. What in the world could have happened to a man like Zacchaeus that he gives everything he has to the poor and he says, I'm changing everything? Jesus. Man, Jesus didn't leave him where he was. Jesus doesn't leave you where you are. He's here today. And Jenny, would you come on up? Jesus accepts you for who you are, and he doesn't leave you where you are, just like Zacchaeus. Transformed his life, flipped everything around. See, the way Jesus works is totally countercultural to the way we think and we've learned. For Jesus, you belong, and then you behave. You're accepted, and because you are accepted, you now begin to think differently, behave differently, talk differently, walk differently, feel different. You belong, and then you behave. This is the message of Jesus. And this is how it affects us personally and as a community. Personally, I pray that every single person walks out of this building today knowing that they are accepted. That even at times when your friends don't accept you, when your coworkers don't, maybe your spouse and kids don't even accept you, that Jesus always accepts you. You don't have to clean up. You don't have to do anything for that acceptance. He accepts you for who you are. But he's not going to leave you where you are. And as a church community, I pray that Living Waters is never a church that tells people that they have to behave a certain way before they can belong. No, here you belong. Here you belong to Living Waters. Here you're accepted. Doesn't matter what's going on in your life. Doesn't matter what kind of sin you're living in. Doesn't matter what you're going through, the mistakes you've made, what you're struggling with. No, you belong here. Come together with us. You belong with us. And let's behave differently as we get to know Jesus more. As we get to become friends with Jesus, as he stretches out and says, I want to be your friend. That's how it works. That's how we change. He accepts us for who we are, but he doesn't leave us where we are. The truth is, I'm Zacchaeus. You're Zacchaeus. We're all Zacchaeus. We're no different. We were all born into this world with sin. We've all made mistakes. By nature, we are all bad people. But Jesus comes to us and he says, I accept you for who you are in your current state, but I'm not going to leave you where you are. I'm going to change you. I'm going to renew you. I'm going to birth a new creation inside of you. You're going to be born again. That's what that means, to be born again. It's this right here. I'm going to save you. I'm going to transform your life. I'm going to transform your home and your marriage and your relationships because I accept you for who you are. Would you just bow your heads and just close your eyes? And I just want to do this so that we can just take a moment to shut out the distractions, to just take a moment of reflection. And if you could kind of just look at your life and just kind of spread it out as if it were on a movie screen or a storyboard or something like that. All the different areas of your life. Where are you right now? Are you feeling rejected maybe? Do you wrestle with those thoughts and think, man, if my wife, if my husband knew who I really was, they'd never accept me. If my kids or my friends or my coworkers knew who I really was, and would they really accept me? I'm here to tell you today, Jesus knows you by name, and he accepts you for who you are. Maybe you're wrestling with some of those feelings. Maybe you're in a tough spot in life right now, and you're just struggling. I want you to know, Jesus isn't going to leave you where you are. He's going to get you through it. You're going to get through it. If that's you today and you're connecting with this, I just want to pray over you. And would you just agree in your heart with this prayer? Jesus, right now, like Zacchaeus, we come down from our tree. We come down from the personas and the facades and all of that hard work that we've been trying to do to garner your attention, to get others to accept us. We come down from it right now, and we accept you into our life. Jesus, I accept you into my home, into my life. I thank you, Jesus, that you accept me for who I am, but you don't leave me where I am. God, I'm going to live for you. I'm going to let you transform my life. I'm changing everything. Changing everything. And God, right now, I pray for every single person in this room as they walk out the doors of Living Waters today, as they go get into their car, as they go home, whatever they do today and throughout this week, I pray that they would have the overwhelming sense that they are accepted. That they would know that, Jesus, you're their friend. That you're reaching out to them, that you want to get to know them, that you want to spend quality time with them, that you don't judge them, that you don't look down upon them, but that you accept them. And as a result of that, that their lives would be transformed. In Jesus' name. And everybody said with me, come on, amen. God bless you guys.